in local administration and developed their own educational system. They were allowed to open 3 higher institutions so that Ukrainians from all over Central Europe could receive their education there. But Romania, as well as Poland, resorted to a policy of assimilation. Ukrainians were banned from membership of local government bodies, and the old term Russian replaced the term Ukrainian in all official documents. In Poland, the system of Ukrainian schooling was replaced by a bilingual system dominated by the Polish language. All the Ukrainian departments were closed down at Lviv University, and the long-promised Ukrainian university was never opened. The 5 million strong Ukrainian population constituted the largest ethnic minority in Poland. Almost 90% of the Ukrainians lived in villages. Villages were overpopulated, and the demand for land was acute. The situation worsened even further when the government began to allot plots of land to Polish officers and soldiers in Galicia and Wołyń. By 1938, 200,000 Polish settlers had got the best land there. The Ukrainians resisted Polonization. They acted both legally and in conspiracy. Legally, the center political parties set themselves the goal of obtaining autonomy. Among those parties, the most influential was UNDO, the Ukrainian National Democratic Organization. A large network of social organizations emerged. The Union of Ukrainian Women involved a considerable number of women in its activities. Prosvita societies opened libraries, private schools, and gymnasia, teaching the Ukrainian language. Quite a number of social, political, and economic journals were published. A rather powerful cooperative movement developed, which incorporated over 600,000 members. Not only did cooperatives, banks, and insurance companies provide economic security, they also taught members how to become a citizen and a master of one's own land. The legally recognized parties and organizations achieved undeniable successes. UNDO introduced a number of deputies to the Polish parliament, and its leader was the vice speaker. However, it was not so much the legal organizations that determined Polish-Ukrainian relations, but the nationalists acting in conspiracy. The first clandestine nationalistic movement was launched by the officers of the Ukrainian Sishots, who were frustrated by their defeat in the civil war. The Ukrainian military organization, called UVO, was formed in Czechoslovakia's Prague. It was headed by Colonel Konowalec. The activities of UVO were focused on sabotage and political assassinations. The target were not only Poles. The main enemies were Ukrainians who wanted an agreement with Poland. The ideologist of the Ukrainian nationalism was Dmytro Dontsov, the editor-in-chief of the weekly Vysnik, published in Lviv. He laid the blame for the defeat of the Ukrainian Revolution of 1917 to 1920 at the door of the Democrats and Socialists. Dontsov rejected democracy. He claimed that it was not the democratic majority, but instead conscious nationalistic elite who have a historical right to force masses to take action. The nation has the right to a common territory, so all the occupying powers have to be treated as enemies. Dontsov's ideas proved to be very appealing for young people. They laid the foundation of the program of the OUN, Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which incorporated the UFO. In 1930, the OUN carried out a large-scale sabotage operation, during which they committed about 200 arson attacks, along with railroad demolitions and attacks on the power networks. The Polish government sent in regular troops to Galicia and started a process of pacification. Collective responsibility was introduced. Masses of people were arrested in dozens of villages. Peasants' property was destroyed and corporal punishment was introduced. The OUN responded with new terrorist attacks. The spiral of mutual hostility and violence escalated. In 1933, Stepan Bandera became the head of the OUN in Poland. It was he who organized two impressive assassinations. One of the attaché of the Soviet consulate in Lviv, in revenge for the organized famine in Ukraine. The other of the Polish Minister of Internal Affairs, General Pieracki, who had been in charge of the pacification process. Poland renounced its agreement on the protection of ethnic minorities. A detention center for political prisoners was set up in Bereza Kartuska, holding Polish opposition members along with Ukrainian activists. Against this background of worsening conflict, judicious and sensible voices sounded that were calling for normalization. Metropolitan Andrzej Szeptycki denounced both the Polish pacification and the activities of the Ukrainian nationalists. Jerzy Giedroyć would call upon unification for the sake of the interests of the Polish state, but neither was listened to. In 1938, in eastern Poland, 200 Orthodox churches were destroyed and 150 were handed over to Catholics. Even those who had so far advocated a policy of mutual understanding began to believe that nothing but a new war could give freedom to the Ukrainians. The state that had most been seeking a change in the order of Europe was Germany. For years, the Ukrainian nationalists had cooperated with the German military intelligence, thinking that Germany would help the Ukrainians create their own free state in any future conflict. Hitler, being the enemy to both Poland and Bolsheviks, was regarded by many Ukrainians as their most natural ally. On the 30th of September 1938, Great Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement with Germany. It gave leave to the partitioning of Czechoslovakia. The weakened government in Prague eventually acknowledged the autonomy of Transcarpathian Ukraine. Augustin Voloshin was made its prime minister. Hitler, however, had different plans, and Transcarpathian Ukraine was given to Hungary. Hardly had the Voloshin government proclaimed the independence of the new state when Hungarian troops occupied the whole territory. The fall of Carpathian Rus became one of the reasons for the organization to split into two factions, Melniks and Banderas. The Melnikists kept believing that Ukraine's independence could only be obtained with the help of Germany. The Banderovists were less gullible. They thought that independence must be a purely Ukrainian cause. Whilst not completely excluding the German support, they considered themselves to be an equal partner of Germany. Both parties proved to be deluded. On the 1st of September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War broke out. On the 17th of September, the Red Army occupied the eastern territories of Poland, thus fulfilling the secret terms of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. The invasion was carried out under the motto of liberating the fraternal people, Ukrainians and Belarusians, from bourgeois Poland, and at first it was welcomed by most Ukrainians. The new power undertook the parceling out of community and church estates and also slowed down unemployment. The Polish university was replaced by the Ukrainian university. Ukrainian schools, museums, libraries and theaters were opened. In this atmosphere, under the surveillance of the Red Army, elections were conducted, though undesirable candidates were prevented from standing. The People's Assembly elected in such a fashion and proclaimed to be the